We glance at the stars for beauty, maybe a wish. But what if our ancestors saw not just beauty, but the very blueprint of their survival? A clock for every hunt, a compass for every migration, a calendar for every harvest, a purpose we've utterly forgotten. Your smartphone tracks every second, every sunrise, every moon phase with surgical precision. It tells you the exact date of the next new moon, the precise hour of the winter solstice, or when the salmon runs are expected to peak in Alaska, all with a tap of your finger. But strip away that technology. Strip away atomic clocks and satellite navigation. Picture yourself standing, perhaps 30,000 years ago, on the vast, unforgiving plains of the Pleistocene, a crude spear clutched in your hand, your very existence hinging on knowing what comes next. For these ancient humans, the only reliable timepiece, the only dependable calendar, was the colossal, dark expanse above their heads. They didn't carry time, they read it. They didn't consult an app, they consulted the heavens, observing the sun's deliberate path across the sky, charting the moon's cyclical phases, and memorizing the consistent, majestic procession of stars wasn't some idle philosophical curiosity. It was a brutal, life-or-death necessity. Without this cosmic clock, their world would have plunged into utter chaos, unpredictable, and ultimately, unsustainable. Consider the sun, our most immediate celestial beacon. Every morning, its return signaled the start of a new day, a chance to forage, to hunt, to mend tools, to stay ahead of the lurking predators. But its path wasn't static. Over weeks and months, our ancestors meticulously watched the sun's arc across the sky. They noticed the sun dipping lower and lower each day as the brutal grip of winter approached, shortening the precious daylight hours. They felt the air grow crisp, saw the leaves change, but it was the sun's shrinking journey that served as the undeniable celestial warning. This wasn't merely an observation, it was an imperative to action. Now was the time to begin stockpiling dried meat and berries, to reinforce the cave entrance against the coming blizzards, to craft warmer hides, or to begin the arduous journey south to warmer hunting grounds before the snow made movement impossible. A single miscalculation, a failure to heed the sun's silent warning, could mean starvation or freezing to death for an entire family, an entire nomadic band. Then, there was the moon, a luminous, ever-changing beacon. Its reliable, roughly 29, 5-day cycle of phases offered humanity its first universally understood monthly calendar. For coastal tribes, like those early Homo sapiens living along the abundant shores of what is now South Africa, understanding the moon's influence was critical for survival. They knew that the lowest tides, perfect for gathering vast quantities of mussels, crabs, and oysters from exposed rock pools, consistently occurred during the full moon and the new moon. Imagine a prehistoric gatherer watching the moon swell to a brilliant orb, knowing that in just a few nights, the ocean would recede, revealing a feast. Missing that window meant a meager meal, or worse, hunger, especially in lean times. Even for inland communities, a bright full moon offered extended visibility for nocturnal hunts, for traveling between camps without the crushing darkness of a new moon, or for specific rituals performed under its watchful glow. And finally, the stars, the vast, seemingly fixed tapestry of the night sky. While the sun and moon governed daily and monthly rhythms, the stars provided the grand annual cycles. Ancient humans didn't need telescopes or named constellations like Orion or Ursa Major to recognize patterns. They simply needed to observe. They would notice a particular cluster of stars appearing low on the eastern horizon just before dawn, a phenomenon known as a heliacal rising, and link its appearance to the arrival of the great bison herds in their valley. Or perhaps the steady descent of another prominent star group below the western horizon after twilight signaled the time to pack up, as the seasonal rains were about to begin, making the land impassable. For hunter-gatherers in what is now modern Siberia, the position of the North Star or other circumpolar stars that never set might have helped them gauge the progression of the year. When certain constellations climbed highest in the night sky, it was a signal. The woolly mammoths would be passing through the mountain pass, or the wild horses would be migrating to the richer grasslands. Missing these celestial cues wasn't just missing an opportunity, it was failing to intercept the very food source that would sustain them through the next brutal winter. Their lives were utterly intertwined with the sky's grand, predictable dance. Without the guidance of this celestial choreography, their world would have been a terrifying, trackless void, leading to random, desperate movements and almost certain demise. The sky was the ultimate metronome, dictating the pulse of prehistoric life, informing every critical decision from when to plant nascent crops to when to follow the migrating game. But simply knowing when to do things wasn't enough. What about knowing where to go? Especially when danger lurked at every turn. Imagine, for a moment, you're standing on the edge of the known world, perhaps 50,000 years ago. You've journeyed for weeks, maybe months. Your entire clan's survival depended on reaching new hunting grounds or escaping a brutal climate shift. There are no roads, no signposts, certainly no maps or compasses. The landscape stretches before you, an endless, often featureless canvas of plains, forests, or even the vast, indifferent expanse of the open ocean. A single wrong turn, a misremembered landmark, and you're not just inconvenienced, you're dead. Starvation, thirst, or exposure will claim you. This was the terrifying reality for our ancient ancestors. In this desperate context, the stars, which had already served as a calendar for planting and harvesting, transformed into something far more vital, an indispensable celestial GPS. Forget your satellite navigation system. For early humans, the entire night sky was their navigational interface, a cosmic roadmap etched in fire across the inky blackness. They didn't just look at the stars, they read them, like a story written in light, guiding them across distances we can barely comprehend today. How did they do it? It began with observation, passed down through generations. They learned to identify consistent celestial patterns, what we now call constellations. Think of the Big Dipper, or Ursa Major, which ancient cultures across the northern hemisphere recognized in various forms. This wasn't just a pretty cluster of stars, it was a reliable pointer. Follow the two stars at the end of the Dipper's bowl, the pointer stars, and they lead you directly to Polaris, the North Star. For anyone in the northern hemisphere, Polaris stands almost perfectly still in the sky, a fixed beacon marking true north. No matter the season, no matter the time of night, Polaris held its position, offering an unwavering compass when all earthly landmarks vanished into shadow or fog. But it wasn't just about the North Star. Different constellations, like Orion with its distinctive belt, would rise and set in specific locations along the horizon, changing with the seasons but always returning to predictable positions. Ancient travelers, whether trekking through the Siberian steppes or navigating the Saharan desert, meticulously memorized these rising and setting points. They learned to star hop, moving from one familiar pattern to the next, much like we might follow highway signs today. They understood that the angle of certain stars above the horizon would tell them their latitude, moving north or south. These weren't abstract calculations. These were life or death measurements, ingrained through years of relentless travel. Consider the incredible journeys of early humans. Imagine the first groups of Homo sapiens pushing out of Africa, not with modern equipment, but with the entire celestial sphere as their guide. They traversed continents, crossed land bridges like Beringia to populate the Americas, and, in one of humanity's most breathtaking navigational feats, the ancient Polynesians sailed thousands of miles across the vast featureless Pacific Ocean. These master navigators, often called the greatest mariners in human history, committed to memory thousands of individual stars, their paths, their rising and setting points, and even the subtle changes in ocean swells influenced by distant islands. They used a combination of celestial knowledge, wave patterns, and bird migrations to pinpoint tiny specks of land, demonstrating an astronomical prowess that rivals modern technology. Their migrations weren't just about exploring, they were driven by the primal need for resources, the relentless pressures of climate shifts, and the simple, profound urge to survive. The reliability of these cosmic signposts was absolutely unmatched. Rivers might change course, mountains might be obscured by fog, forests could burn, but the stars remained. They were the unchanging beacons of the night sky, offering direction and hope when all earthly landmarks failed. When the world below seemed utterly chaotic and unpredictable, this profound connection to the stars wasn't just practical, it was deeply psychological, offering a sense of order and cosmic certainty in an often terrifying world. But beyond this incredible practical guidance, this stellar GPS, what deeper meaning did these unchanging cosmic patterns offer them about their own place in the universe? What did it mean to look up and see a constant, eternal guide in a world of endless change? The stars, shimmering diamonds scattered across the velvet blackness, were far more than just a cosmic clock or a celestial compass for our ancestors. They were a canvas, a vast, breathtaking expanse where the human imagination ran wild, painting stories, fears, and aspirations in light. Imagine, for a moment, an ancient mother, huddled by a flickering fire on a bitterly cold night, listening to the howls of unseen predators in the distant forest. Her stomach aches with hunger, her children shiver beside her. The world is a place of raw, terrifying unknowns. And then she looks up. Above her, the familiar patterns of stars begin to take shape, no longer just random points of light. They are faces. They are figures. They are the cosmic stage where her people's most profound dramas play out. This wasn't just practical navigation. This was meaning. This was the profound comfort that came from connecting the mundane, often brutal, realities of their lives to something grand, universal, and eternal. In the ancient Greek world, as the winter sky wheeled overhead, they didn't just see a collection of bright stars forming a rough human shape. They saw Orion, the mighty hunter, forever chasing the constellation Taurus, or perhaps locked in eternal battle with Scorpio, whose venomous sting had brought about his demise. Children gathered around the fire, mesmerized, as elders pointed to the sparkling cluster of the Pleiades, telling tales of the seven sisters fleeing Orion's relentless pursuit, transformed into stars by Zeus's mercy. These weren't mere bedtime stories. They were constellations woven into the very fabric of their identity, their history, their understanding of human nature and divine intervention. But the projection of meaning onto the stars was a universal human impulse. Across vast distances and vastly different cultures, the same impulse resonated. To the Maori people of New Zealand, the distinct cluster of stars we call the Pleiades was Matariki, a sacred beacon whose heliacal rising in winter marked the start of their new year, a time for remembrance, celebration, and planning for the harvest. For the ancient Egyptians, the brilliant star Sirius, or Sopdet, held immense significance. Its annual appearance in the dawn sky heralded the life-giving inundation of the Nile, bringing fertile silt and ensuring survival. It was intrinsically linked to Isis, the goddess of motherhood and fertility, and to her deceased husband Osiris, guiding their eternal journey. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the elaborate zodiac system we still vaguely recognize today began to take shape. Not merely for tracking seasons, but for understanding destiny. Kings and priests meticulously charted the movements of celestial bodies, believing the gods communicated their will through the heavens. A comet streaking across the night, or a rare planetary alignment, wasn't just an astronomical event. It was a potent omen, a direct message from deities like Ishtar or Marduk, warning of war, famine, or portending prosperity. The stars became an ancient Twitter feed from the divine, cryptic yet endlessly compelling. These cosmic narratives solidified cultural identities. Imagine a tribe, thousands of years ago, sitting under an immense star-dusted sky. Their shared stories of how the Great Bear, Ursa Major, came to be in the heavens, or how the Milky Way was the river of souls leading to the afterlife, created an unbreakable bond. These weren't just shared superstitions. They were a common language, a moral compass, a historical record etched in the sky. They provided answers to the biggest questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? What happens after death? The cyclical nature of the stars, their seemingly eternal dance of rising and setting, offered a powerful metaphor for life, death, and the promise of rebirth. The sun dying each night only to be reborn each morning, the moon waxing and waning, constellations disappearing and reappearing, these were cosmic promises of continuity and renewal. When a loved one died, perhaps lost to a predator or illness, the vastness of the cosmos, previously a source of fear, could transform into a comforting thought. Their spirit wasn't simply gone. It might have joined the celestial river, become a new star, or journeyed to a realm beyond the veil, guided by familiar constellations. The stars offered a framework for understanding sorrow, offering solace in the face of the unexplainable, connecting the individual's transient existence to a grand, universal tapestry that stretched beyond human comprehension. But did this profound connection to the stars, this elaborate tapestry of myth and meaning, also offer something more tangible? Did our ancestors merely look to the heavens for comfort and stories, for explanations of the past and present? Or did they also believe the stars held secrets about the future, whispers of what was yet to come, helping them anticipate and prepare for the earthly events that would shape their very survival? Imagine living life without a weather app, without a calendar, without even the most basic understanding of germ theory or geological stability. For our ancient ancestors, the future wasn't just unknown, it was an immediate, terrifying void of constant what-ifs. Would the spring thaw bring a bountiful harvest, or would an unforeseen frost decimate their delicate crops? Would the river, their lifeline, swell into a devastating flood, washing away homes and lives? Would the shadows beyond their flickering firelight conceal a hungry predator, or would the very ground beneath their feet give way in an earthquake? Every day was a gamble, every season a roll of the cosmic dice. Life was precarious, survival a daily miracle, won through constant vigilance and ingenuity. But amidst this terrifying uncertainty, they found a constant, a rhythm that, unlike the chaotic earth, seemed immutable, eternal, the sky. Above the swaying trees, above the roaring rivers, above the shifting sands, the stars marched with unwavering precision. The moon waxed and waned with predictable regularity. The planets, those wandering stars, traced their complex but ultimately repeatable paths, and in this celestial ballet, our ancestors saw not just beauty, but patterns. They saw a silent, slow-moving clock, a giant cosmic calendar. This wasn't a sudden revelation. This was the culmination of generations, centuries, millennia of patient, meticulous observation. Picture a grandmother, perhaps in a settlement along the ancient Nile, teaching her granddaughter that when the bright star we call Sirius, Sothis to them, first reappeared in the pre-dawn sky after weeks of absence, it heralded the imminent, life-giving flood. This wasn't a guess. It was knowledge, hard-won and painstakingly passed down. They didn't have telescopes, but their eyes, sharpened by necessity and attention, were instruments of incredible precision. They tracked the solstices and equinoxes by the precise rise and set points of the sun against distant landmarks. They charted the moon's 29, 5-day cycle, understanding its influence on tides and possibly even correlating it to menstrual cycles, further intertwining human and cosmic rhythms. And as they watched, they began to connect the dots. A comet, blazing across the night sky, might be followed by an unusually harsh winter. A particularly vibrant meteor shower could precede a season of abundant game. The specific alignment of certain planets, visible only to those who knew exactly when and where to look, might coincide with a period of drought or, conversely, exceptional fertility for the land. Consider the Maya, who developed an astronomical system so sophisticated it could predict solar eclipses centuries in advance, not just for spiritual awe, but because understanding these celestial events was deeply woven into their agricultural cycles, their calendar, and their very social structure. They knew that the movements of Venus, the morning star, were not just beautiful, they dictated planting seasons, harvest times, and even major decisions like when to engage in warfare. This wasn't some random, mystical belief system born out of fear. This was proto-science in its most fundamental form. It was hypothesis, observation, data collection, and eventually, prediction. It was the birth of the scientific method, hammered out on the anvil of survival. They weren't just hoping a constellation would bring rain. They were observing last time that star group was in that position at this time of year. The rains came 2 weeks later. Let's plant accordingly. This was their attempt, desperate and brilliant, to find order and predictability in a world that seemed designed to be chaotic. They were building predictive models, not with supercomputers, but with memory, oral tradition, and the vast, silent blackboard of the night sky. The sky then became a giant, slow-moving oracle. It allowed early societies to anticipate, to prepare, to store grain for a lean season they saw coming, to move their herds before a drought hit, to fortify their settlements if portents suggested unrest. It offered a crucial margin of error. a tiny window of foresight that could mean the difference between thriving and perishing. It provided explanations for the inexplicable and validation for their actions. If the stars foretold a difficult period, perhaps it motivated communal effort, sacrifice, or a renewed focus on unity. It gave them a sense of control, however illusionary, over their destinies. It fostered collective wisdom and an intensely practical yet deeply spiritual relationship with the cosmos. But here's the deeper question. Beyond these immediate practical functions, beyond even the profound spiritual comfort it offered, did the very act of staring into that cosmic oracle fundamentally change us? Did this millennia-long pursuit of order in the stars, this relentless pattern-seeking, this urge to connect the far-off with the everyday, sculpt the human mind itself? Did it drive the very cognitive abilities that eventually led us to build telescopes, launch rockets, and decipher the universe's most complex equations? Could it be that our ceaseless gaze upwards didn't just tell us about the future, but actively shaped the future of humanity's intellect, driving our evolution in ways we are only just beginning to comprehend? We've talked about the practical gifts the stars offered: navigation, timekeeping, predicting seasons. But what if the ultimate, forgotten purpose of looking up wasn't just what the stars revealed to ancient humans, but how the act itself transformed them? I believe the night sky served as humanity's first greatest cognitive gym, actively shaping the very architecture of the human brain. Imagine, for a moment, an ancient human, perhaps a Cro-Magnon hunter in the vast grasslands of what is now France, huddled around a fading fire, or a Neolithic farmer gazing up from their fields in the Fertile Crescent. Above them, an unbroken tapestry of light. They didn't just see random dots, their survival depended on imposing order on that celestial chaos. This wasn't a passive gaze. It was an intense, nightly engagement that hammered out and honed some of our most fundamental mental faculties. Take pattern recognition. We think of it today as spotting a tiger in the jungle or a berry bush among thorns. But looking up, day after day, year after year, at the same seemingly scattered points of light and recognizing, say, the familiar belt of Orion or the subtle curve of the Big Dipper, this required a cognitive leap. It wasn't handed to them. They had to invent these patterns, to connect the dots in their minds, to remember them. This wasn't innate. It was a skill forged in the crucible of the night sky, repeatedly practicing abstract pattern identification on a truly grand scale. This ability to spot a coherent form within a seemingly random distribution of elements, a skill critical for hunting, foraging, and later, agriculture, was constantly reinforced and refined by the nightly celestial spectacle. Then there's abstract thought. What is a bear or a hunter in the sky? It's not a literal animal. It's an idea projected onto distant suns. This act of symbolic representation, of creating meaning where none inherently existed, is a cornerstone of human intelligence. Predicting the slow, majestic march of constellations across the seasons, understanding that one pattern here implies a future position there, this demanded a profound grasp of spatio-temporal reasoning, moving beyond the immediate sensory input to predict distant events. It's an exercise in mental modeling on a scale unimaginable today, outside of complex scientific endeavors. And long-term memory? Indispensable. Ancient life didn't have calendars or clocks in our sense. Their calendar was the sky. When Sirius rises just before the sun, the floods will come. When the Pleiades disappear in the evening, winter is approaching. Remembering these intricate celestial cues, associating them with earthly events like migrations, harvests, or seasonal changes, and transmitting that knowledge across generations required an astounding capacity for long-term recall and contextual memory. This wasn't merely memorizing a shopping list, it was memorizing the very rhythm of the world, woven into the fabric of the stars. This constant nightly engagement with the sky didn't just foster these individual skills, it drove the very development of language itself. How do you teach a child about the celestial patterns, the stories, the crucial timings? You describe them. You invent names. You tell narratives. Look, little one, see those 3 bright stars? That's the hunter's belt. When the hunter appears in this part of the sky, it means the great herds will soon migrate. This oral tradition, passing down complex astronomical knowledge, demanded increasingly sophisticated vocabulary and narrative structures. It wasn't just storytelling. It was the foundation of scientific inquiry, observation, prediction, and the communal sharing of knowledge. The stars were the ultimate textbook, and the act of deciphering them became the ultimate lesson in communication and collaborative learning. In essence, the stars weren't just a tool, they were a fundamental catalyst for human intelligence and consciousness itself. They pushed our ancestors to ask not just what is that, but why is it there? And what does it mean for us? They sparked wonder, curiosity, and the first inklings of philosophy and cosmology, elevating survival beyond mere instinct to an intellectual and spiritual quest. But look at us now. In our modern world, we've largely severed this primal connection. Light pollution blankets our cities, obscuring all but the brightest planets. Our eyes are drawn downwards, glued to the glowing rectangles of digital screens, feeding on curated content, rather than upward to the raw, untamed canvas of the cosmos. We've lost the quiet contemplation, the patient observation, the direct engagement with the vastness that once shaped our minds. What have we lost, truly? Perhaps a fundamental cognitive exercise. Perhaps a source of perspective and humility. Perhaps even a part of our ancestral self that still yearns for that ancient gaze. What could we regain then by simply stepping outside, away from the city glow, and just looking up again? What dormant faculties might reawaken? What forgotten wonder might resurface, if we simply allowed our minds to once again wander among the stars? So, why did ancient humans look up at the stars? It was far more profound than simply admiring their beauty. For our ancestors, the night sky wasn't a passive backdrop. It was an active, essential partner in their very survival. Imagine a world without clocks, maps, or even reliable seasonal calendars. This was the world of early humans. The cosmos above was their ultimate guide, a celestial clock dictating when to hunt migrating animals, when to plant, when to seek shelter from the coming cold. It was their compass across vast, featureless landscapes, a beacon illuminating paths through unknown territories. This wasn't abstract knowledge. It was visceral, etched into their daily struggle for existence. This constant interaction, this life or death dependency, didn't just inform their decisions, it literally shaped their cognition. Their minds were wired to observe, to remember, to interpret the subtle dance of the heavens. Patterns, cycles, predictability, these were the lessons the stars taught, fostering the very foundations of human intelligence, mathematics, and even early philosophy. The stars weren't just observed, they were integrated into the core operating system of ancient human consciousness. This, then, is the forgotten purpose. The stars as a fundamental blueprint for human thought, human ingenuity, and human survival. A purpose that echoes in our very DNA, long after we've ceased to consciously acknowledge it. Think of their world, harsh, dangerous, shrouded in vast natural darkness. Every decision, every movement, every moment of rest was calibrated against the cosmic rhythm. Now consider our own. We live bathed in artificial light, our nights often brighter than their days. Our feeds are endless, our screens glow with curated realities, divorcing us from the raw, unfiltered natural world. We consult apps for the weather, GPS for directions, digital calendars for seasons. The guiding light of the cosmos, once so vital, is now a distant, often obscured spectacle. What have we sacrificed in this profound shift? What knowledge, wonder, what innate understanding have we willingly traded for convenience and constant illumination? Perhaps we've lost a deeper sense of time, an intuitive grasp of cycles, a connection to the vastness that humbled and inspired our ancestors. Maybe we've dulled an essential part of our perceptive capacity, a part of our brain honed over millennia to read the subtle language of the universe. When we look up today, we see flickering pixels more often than distant suns, and perhaps, in doing so, we've inadvertently dimmed a part of ourselves. Perhaps the greatest lesson from our ancestors isn't found in a dusty textbook, but in a simple, profound act, turning off the lights, stepping away from the digital glow, allowing our eyes to adjust, and simply looking up. In that moment of quiet reconnection, we don't just observe the stars, we tap into an ancient part of ourselves, a memory encoded in our very being. We remember the vast guiding cosmos that made us who we are, that shaped our intelligence, our curiosity, our very will to survive and thrive. It's a chance to reframe our place in the universe, to find perspective beyond the immediate, and to feel the incredible continuity of human experience stretching back to those first stargazers. Their survival depended on it. Our understanding of ourselves, perhaps, still does. If rediscovering the deep, often surprising history of our species helps you reframe your own existence and find new perspectives, then hit that subscribe button. Join us as we continue to unearth the incredible ingenuity, profound wisdom, and extraordinary daily realities of ancient humans. And perhaps, in doing so, rediscover a little bit of ourselves.